Hello and welcome back to another video. If you're looking for recommendations on what manhwa to read, then here are some that I've read recently that might be of interest. Manhwa titles are timestamped in the video for your convenience. Our first manhwa for today is I Became a Doting Father, a modern manhwa that I can read up to chapter 199 on. Its main character is Lee Ju-won, a 24-year-old man living in modern-day Korea. On one fateful day, he was attending the funeral of his drunkard uncle when he found out that his uncle actually had left behind a 5-year-old daughter by the name of Yeondu. All the family members were murmuring about who would take care of the child, but no one stepped up. Ju-won found this situation similar to his own as he lost his parents at a younger age, but he was able to survive nonetheless, albeit a little lost at times. He didn't want Yeondu to go through the same thing that he did, and so he therefore took it upon himself to be Yeondu's dad, to the happiness of his own relatives. The journey of a dad and his daughter begins here. The story is 8 out of 10. Two people trying to overcome their past is a great way to have an attachment to the plot at hand. Overall, it's a touching and sincere storyline that pulled at my heartstrings. The only caveat I put to it is that there's a portion of the manhwa that focuses heavily on social media, but doesn't highlight the dangers or negativity that could come from it. It is a feel-good manhwa, so the fact that it merely presents mostly the bright side of things is not necessarily a bad thing. Otherwise though, it's actually quite good. The characters are 11 out of 10. It's not usual that I would really overstate my enjoyment of a particular manhwa, but from Ju-won, Yeondu, and everyone they interact with, it's just such a treat and a feel-good vibe overall that I honestly couldn't put it down once I started it. Ju-won and Yeondu are just too precious as a dad and daughter pair, whilst everyone around them are just as interesting to delve into when given the chance. The art is 10 out of 10. The atmosphere and drawings are heavily leaning towards a light and fluffy style. There are moments of negativity or similar emotional stigma, but it's mainly used as vehicles for growth for the characters. Fans of feel-good stories or art styles would very much enjoy this manhwa. So if you're a fan of childcare manhwas in the modern setting, like My Brother and His Gift from my previous videos, then I Became a Doting Father is a definite recommend. This next manhwa to take a look at is Foresighting Investor, a modern manhwa that I've currently read up to chapter 53 on. The protagonist of this story is Kang Jin-hoo, an individual living in modern-day Korea who just finished his military service. Meeting a friend who, weirdly enough, invested in Bitcoin in the early 2010s, Jin-hoo experiences a weird vision of sorts. An image of an eagle and golden letters informs him that those Bitcoins need to be sold now. He's able to convince his friend, funnily enough, and through this effort, is able to cash out heavily. Instead of staying happily there though, Jin-hoo and his friend start investigating his little fantasy power vision thingy and start utilizing it to gain even more money. Will there ever be an amount though that is enough? The story is 7 out of 10. What starts out as an interesting introduction and presentation transforms into an investing and money-making focused plot. Although, as it gets later on, there are clearly consequences that Jin-hoo, his girlfriends, and subordinates must go through, and they will need nerves of steel to actually follow his directions to go through with it. The characters are 8 out of 10. Good friendships mixed with connection building and absurd calls in the land of investing is a good way to describe Kang Jin-ho. Of course, as a reminder, this is set in around the 2010s era, so it's kind of really easy to take things into hindsight, at least the events that they're covering. It's able to deliver the various characters questioning the calls that Jin-hoo makes, and considering it almost seems like it's an irrational perspective that he's taking at least. The art is 7 out of 10. The overall atmosphere and vibe is normal and typical for a modern manhwa, considering how much I've covered on this channel now. Its uniqueness, though, comes from that golden vision it lays out, and it's clearly supposed to be more of the fantasy style, but the image it captures is a little odd overall, at least in my book. So if you're a fan of modern manhwas, and one focused on making money by having visions of the future in a more abstract way sounds a little interesting, then make sure to try Foresighting Investor as I give it the fans of the genre approval. Dungeon Food Truck Owner is the name of our next manhwa to take a look at. It's a modern manhwa that I've now read up to chapter 64 on. Min Ji-eun is the name of its main character. Living in the typical modern fantasy world where dungeons or a tower exists, man, there are really a lot of these, huh? Jiun finds herself randomly one day awakening as a food truck owner. Okay, that's at least something new. Jiun randomly travels throughout the tower and serves various dishes whether there are customers or not. The weird part is that in this world, normal food cannot be taken with adventurers or awakened people into the tower with them. So they have to consume potions and jerky, which doesn't really taste good, and they don't really have time to eat well per se. This completely changes though with Jiun involved. The story doesn't stay like this for long though, as it actually progresses to something a little bit more world building focused and Jiun being someone specifically chosen. The story is 9 out of 10. What I initially envisioned to be more of a slice of life running a food truck quickly turns into something more as Jiun discovers the world. The reason for her powers, the identity of the various entities around her, and the inhabitants of the tower space. Plus, why does the tower even exist in the first place? Overall, a good development so far. The characters are 6 out of 10. Its weakest aspect, I find that for the most part, all of the characters are very one-dimensional and don't really have any room to explore them with due to the speed and way that the plot is going. Even the main character doesn't really have that much time to shine, at least in my opinion. The art though is an 8 out of 10. The food, overall atmosphere, and even the combat situations that happen overall serve as a good backdrop for the plot being told. Jiun herself and her effort to genuinely provide good food to others is an endearing trait to have, and it shines through. The food art itself looks delicious. So if you're a fan of modern fantasy manhwas but wanted a little bit of a spice up to the overall formula, then Dungeon Food Truck Owner would be something worth considering, giving it a label of interesting, but... Our shorter story for this week is Secret Lessons in Love, a fantasy manhwa that I've currently read up to chapter 30 on. The focus of this plot is on Rose Bell. Originally a noble, her father is an addicted gambler to the point that they lost their noble status and became commoners, and it's still getting worse. Attending an academy mainly made up of noble kids, Rose was an outstanding student, but finds herself falling on hard times due to the aforementioned family situation. One day though, when an exam was needing to be written and she was down on her luck, she gets help from Jasper Conway, an influential noble and someone she had a passing encounter with back when they were kids. Her immediate worries are taken care of by him, but traded for her time to tutor him in magical engineering, a field she is interested and excited in. The potential is 8 out of 10. For a romance manhwa, this has the typical backstory of encountering each other as kids. Male lead remembers the female lead, but the female lead, for some apparent reason, doesn't see the obvious advances or shies away from the relationship. I hope it does something with the magical engineering side, as it does seem to have some legs if it gives the time to do so. The art is 7 out of 10. Due to only having those 30 chapters, it hasn't showcased anything out of the norm, but does have the usual refined characters and scenes typical of an academic fantasy romance. So if you're a fan of following newer stories and enjoy romance manhwas in a school setting, similar to I Swear We're Just Friends from my previous videos, it might be worth taking a look at Secret Lessons in Love. Overall, has some promise. Another week, another highlight. For those unaware, this is a section of the video I update impressions from manhwa that I previously covered. Today's highlight is I'm a Part-Timer for the Gods, which I've now read up to completion at about 100 chapters. Info card description will have links to my original opinion. Yu Dam-duk, the main character of this story, has been on quite an adventure throughout his life. From randomly being struck by lightning to encountering the gods from myth like Poseidon, Hades and such. His encounters with these beings result in him becoming more powerful and potentially a god in his own right. Of course, this is now a finished story, so I don't want to fully spoil everything, so I will leave it here. I will say though, overall, the pacing increases in the latter half and becomes more of a typical hero's journey once I finished it. My previous scores for this manhwa were 8 out of 10 for characters, 6 out of 10 for art, and 8 out of 10 for story. The characters stay the same at 8 out of 10 as most of the characters are memorable and have their own identity and art style, and keep this way all the way to the end. There are some more rushed additions when it comes to characters at the end, but overall it's able to keep things within its original bounds that I outlined in my last review. The art also stays the same at 6 out of 10, as personally, I didn't really enjoy the art style too much, but it is very defined and easy to recognize just from a glance. The focus, though, ends up changing from environments and depictions of the various mythical beings to the journey that Damduk is going through to reach the end of this plot. This easily leads to a discussion about the story, though, as it goes down 2 points from 8 out of 10 to 6 out of 10. After a certain point, you can clearly see an increase in pace, but end up feeling rushed by the end. It seems to be, and I have not done any research on this, that there was some external influence to try and get this manhwa finished, as there are aspects of the story that could have been explored if there was more time, but instead, it fully shifts into a hero's journey format, which probably was still gonna happen eventually anyway, and Damduk's willingness to be that particular hero. I'm a Part-Timer for the Gods was definitely an interesting initial read when I covered it last year. Picking it up again to finish it, I could see a definite change in style and pacing that overall I would say took away from the experience. And so for a shorter manhwa story though, filling in about 100 chapters, it fills that void decently. So if you're a fan of action manhwas, particularly that of a hero's journey, then it could be something to read. And overall, it's okay. Would you agree or would you not? Comment down below your thoughts on I'm a Part-Timer for the Gods. And that wraps up this week's episode. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy the content, and write down in the comment section down below what manhwa you've been reading and I might just take a look. Till next time though, have a good read.